The first snow always made the city quieter, but that night, Vancouver felt completely hollow. I stood at the hospital's glass doors, staring into the pale reflection of the empty lobby behind me. The main lights had already gone out, leaving only the emergency bulbs flickering across the walls, making long, nervous shadows. The night smelled like metal and bleach, a strange mix of sterility and ghosts. It was supposed to be a short shift, just a few hours covering the reception desk before Christmas Eve. But when I walked in, the air felt off, too still, too heavy, like the room was holding its breath. I should have turned around then. If I had known what that night would turn into, maybe I would have left my badge on the counter and walked away. "Minji, you came early." Dr. Lee's voice startled me from behind. His tone was clipped, his perfect posture even more rigid than usual. He looked like a man sculpted from glass, sharp, impossible to touch without bleeding. Good, saves me one phone call. I frowned. Why? What's going on? He exhaled, eyes cold. "I've decided to shut down the field hospital early. The donors are backing out, the staff's being dismissed, effective immediately." I laughed, expecting it to be a joke, maybe one of his cruel tests. "You're kidding, right? It's Christmas Eve. We have patients." He raised a hand. "They'll be transferred. It's not your concern. You'll be paid for the remainder of the week." My throat tightened. I glanced at the patient board behind the desk, names highlighted in red, critical notes scrawled across them. Refugees, immigrants, uninsured workers, the people no one else wanted to treat. "Not my concern," I repeated. The words scraped against my tongue. Dr. Lee adjusted his cufflinks, gold flashing under the dim light. "You're a receptionist, Minji, not a savior." Every syllable felt like a slap. For 2 years, I'd worked beside him in this temporary hospital, built after the floods took out half the lower district. He'd been our leader. Arrogant, yes, but brilliant. People said he'd saved lives no one else could. But right then, all I saw was a man too proud to get his shoes dirty. "So that's it?" I said softly. "Everyone leaves and the rest can die in the snow?" He blinked, no emotion threading through his sharp features. "I'm not responsible for the world's suffering. I'm responsible for results, and this place is losing money." The automatic doors shuddered open as a gust of frozen wind hit us. Behind him, the parking lot lights blinked through falling snow, painting the air in fractured silver. He didn't even flinch. "What about Mrs. Torres? Her dialysis failed last night, or the 2 kids who came in from the shelter?" I asked, desperate. Dr. Lee gave a quiet, humorless smile. "You think kindness pays for electricity?" That's when I realized he wasn't just arrogant, he was hollow. He turned to leave, the faint scent of cologne lingering like smoke. I didn't call after him. The sound of his footsteps faded in the corridor, each one echoing like a countdown. When the doors shut, the silence hit, real, suffocating silence. I walked to the main hall, the distant monitors beeping faintly. Beds stood empty, lined up like ghosts of patients who'd vanished overnight. The nurses had left fast, most too scared to challenge him. But their mugs still sat on the counter. Someone's sweater was draped over a chair. The Christmas lights blinking over the break room door looked absurd now, flashing over the emptiness. For a moment, I just stood there, listening to the hum of machines winding down. Then a soft cough broke the quiet. It came from room 103. I stepped closer, heart pounding. Inside, Mrs. Torres lay half asleep, her oxygen tubes slightly twisted. Her eyes fluttered open when she saw me. "Are they gone?" she whispered. "Most of them. And you, are you staying?" I hesitated. Outside, the wind screamed against the windows, like nature itself demanding an answer. "Yes," I said finally. "Someone has to." She smiled faintly. "You remind me of my daughter. I didn't tell her that I didn't have family here, that my own mother hadn't called in months since we'd fought about my job, about how I cared too much for people who gave nothing back." After checking her vitals, I walked toward the nurse station and picked up the logbook. My name scribbled in shaky handwriting at the bottom, reception. But tonight, it didn't matter. Job titles didn't save lives. For the next few hours, I moved through the halls, tending to whoever was left. An intern named Jonah stayed too. He said he couldn't leave the kids in pediatrics alone. Together, we scrounged what supplies remained, rewired the portable heaters, and rationed the oxygen tanks. It wasn't heroism. It was instinct. Around midnight, the storm grew worse. Thunder rolled through the valley, followed by darkness as power flickered out completely. Jonah cursed under his breath. Generator kicked again. That's the third time tonight. Restart it, I said, grabbing a flashlight. We can't lose the heat now. He nodded and jogged toward the basement stairwell. I turned around and froze. Through the glass doors, a figure stood outside in the snowfall. Tall, motionless, watching. For a second, I thought it was my imagination, but then the figure stepped closer. The light caught his face, Dr. Lee. He opened the door, snow gusting in around him, and stepped through without a word. His hair, usually impeccable, was soaked. His eyes, not cold now, but urgent. "What are you doing back here?" I demanded. "There was a call," he said, chest heaving. "An avalanche hit the highway near Mount Seymour. Dozens injured. The main hospitals are full. Emergency dispatch routed some here." "Here? This place was supposed to be closed." "I know," he said, his voice tight, "which means they're coming to an empty hospital with no staff, unless we run it ourselves." For a heartbeat, I considered hitting him, but then I saw the panic in his eyes, real human emotion flickering through the arrogance. "Fine," I said, "but you take orders from me tonight." The corner of his mouth lifted, the beginning of a protest, but he swallowed it. Deal. We moved fast. Jonah came running back upstairs, confused but ready. Within an hour, we had converted the corridors into triage zones. Blankets replaced curtains, IV poles became makeshift stands for saline bags tied with shoelaces. The storm outside howled like a warning, but inside, life moved again. The first ambulance arrived covered in frost, headlights barely cutting through the whiteout. Then another, and another. There were children crying, paramedics shouting, stretcher wheels scraping against wet tiles. The chaos drowned the fear. I stopped thinking about who left, who betrayed us, who cared or didn't. Only the rhythm mattered. Check vitals, patch wounds, move, repeat. At some point, Mrs. Torres called for me again. I rushed into her room, her eyes wide with fear. "Minji, someone's in the hall. He was looking through the cabinets." I spun around but saw nothing but flickering lights. It could have been a volunteer or a thief. Supplies meant survival, and survival made people desperate. Still, the unease lingered. Hours passed in fragments, a heartbeat, a stretcher, a scream, a silence. I don't remember sitting down once. Every inch of me hurt, but adrenaline kept the exhaustion buried. Dr. Lee worked like a man possessed. His surgical gloves tore twice, blood specked his lab coat. There was no arrogance left in his movements, only necessity. For the first time, I saw him as human, flawed, frightened, and trying. Around 4 a.m., the blizzard eased. Snow whispered against the windows instead of battering them. That's when Jonah came running, face pale. "Minji, I think the radio's picking up something weird." "What do you mean?" He handed me the handheld transceiver, static cutting through the soft hum. Then a distorted voice filtered through. "Casualties. No other survivors. Possible sabotage. Check the trucks." Jonah frowned. Did he say sabotage? Before I could answer, a loud crash came from the storage room. We sprinted there, only to find the back door open, snow piling inside, medical crates smashed on the floor, footprints leading out into the night. Someone had taken the morphine and insulin. Jonah cursed. Dr. Lee's jaw clenched. It was one of the ambulance drivers. I saw him earlier, eyes darting, nervous. "Then he's stealing meds or people are bleeding out?" I said, disbelief churning to rage. Without thinking, I grabbed a coat. Dr. Lee's voice hardened. "Where are you going?" "To stop him." "Don't be stupid, you'll freeze to death out there." But I was already halfway through the door. The snow swallowed me instantly, the wind clawing at my face. I followed the prints, flashlight beam trembling. The world outside was unrecognizable, a blinding white maze of wind and ice. Then the beam caught movement. A figure hunched near one of the ambulances, stuffing bags into the back. "Stop!" I shouted. The man turned, his uniform half torn, breath fogging in the air, his eyes wide. For a second, I saw desperation, not evil. He wasn't stealing to profit. He was trying to save someone. "Please," he said. "My daughter's in the next town. She needs insulin. There's no other stock." The words hit like ice in my lungs. I lowered the flashlight slightly. From the hospital's doors, another shadow moved closer, Dr. Lee's silhouette cutting through the snow. "Get back inside," he barked. But the driver shook his head, clutching the bag tighter. "You don't understand." In that moment, time suspended. The snow, the cold, my racing pulse. I saw both men for what they were, mirrors of human need, one hardened by pride, the other by fear. Then a sound split the night, the sharp crack of metal hitting glass. The driver skidded, headlights flaring. The driver slipped, falling hard. I reached him first, hands trembling. His breath came fast, shallow. Blood pooled beneath him. "Tell her," he whispered. "Tell her I was coming." Then silence. By the time Dr. Lee reached us, it was too late. He knelt, hand hovering uselessly above the body. "You shouldn't have followed," he said weakly. "This isn't your fault." But it felt like it was. All of it. When we came back inside, the generator had failed again. The halls glowed faintly from backup lanterns. For a moment, everything stood still. No screaming, no running, just the lingering echo of what had happened outside. Mrs. Torres had passed while we were gone. Jonah sat beside her bed, head bowed, whispering a prayer. Something inside me cracked then, not loudly, but quietly, like a thread snapping in the dark. Dr. Lee stood by the doorway, staring at nothing. I waited for arrogance, excuses, detachment, but his mouth trembled. He said, "She used to bring tamales every Sunday," said it reminded her of home. It was such a small confession, but it carried the weight of a confession that stripped him raw. We spent the remaining hours in silence, tending to the injured as dawn began to smear pale light across the windows. Snow had buried the city, turning it into a frozen sculpture. The roads would stay closed for days. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang faintly through the wind. Christmas morning. I stared out through the frosted glass, exhaustion numbing grief. Behind me, the smell of antiseptic and metal lingered, but for the first time in hours, I noticed something else. Hope, faint as light through fog. Dr. Lee approached, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you leave when I told you to?" I looked at him, eyes burning. "Because someone had to stay human." He flinched, then nodded. Outside, the bells grew louder, ringing through the desolation like forgiveness. But beneath that quiet, something darker hummed. The missing medicine, the strange radio message, and one question that wouldn't leave my mind. If the avalanche victims were still coming, who exactly were the ones already here? The bells faded as quickly as they came, swallowed by wind and distance. I barely noticed when Jonah collapsed onto a chair beside me, his scrubs soaked in dried blood. He looked older than he had the night before, his boyish face hollowed by exhaustion. "That was the last of the morphine," he said quietly. "Half the patients are out of painkillers. The rest are begging for something to sleep." Dr. Lee rubbed his temples. "We'll make do. We always do." I didn't answer. My hands were still trembling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the ambulance driver's face, his frozen breath, his daughter's unseen silhouette tucked somewhere in another town, still waiting. Around us, the air felt heavier than before, humid despite the cold. Somewhere down the hall, one of the infusion pumps beeped mechanically.
a lonely metronome marking time in a dying building. Jonah stood suddenly. I'll check on the burns unit again. Some of the IV seals are leaking. When he left, silence crept back in. Dr. Lee stood near the window, hands in his coat pockets, staring out at the empty street below. You hate me, he said without turning. It wasn't a question. I don't hate you, I said carefully. I just don't understand you. He smiled without humor. Good, because neither do I. That startled me more than it should have. He had never admitted weakness before, never cracked that shell of precision and ego. Now standing there in the faded morning light, he looked nothing like the man who'd shut everyone out the night before. His coat was torn, his hair damp with melted snow. He looked human, breakable even. You built this place. You called it your second chance. So why throw it away? He turned then, eyes tired but sharp. Because second chances are for people who deserve them, and I stopped believing I do. The words hung in the air, eerie in their calmness. Before I could respond, Jonah's voice echoed from the hall. Dr. Lee, you need to see this. We rushed to the burns unit. The air smelled strange, acrid, chemical, almost like melted plastic. Jonah stood beside one of the beds holding a paper chart. His fingers shook. The patient we admitted around 2, male, early 30s. What about him? Lee asked. He's gone. I blinked. Gone as in missing. Bed's empty, IVs pulled, and this was left under the mattress. He held out a folded piece of paper, smudged with blood on the edges.
Dr. Lee took it carefully, unfolded it, his expression darkened. What does it say? I asked. He hesitated before reading aloud. Leave the lights on. They always come back for what's missing. My stomach turned. What does that even mean? Jonas stepped backward, glancing toward the darkened hallway. You think someone's still inside? Dr. Lee exhaled through his nose. No one survives long out there. Maybe he wandered off while delirious. Then how did he write that message? No one answered. The storm hadn't fully died. Distant thunder still wumbled somewhere beyond the mountains. The hospital's generator flickered again, dropping lights into uneasy pulses that seemed almost timed with my heartbeat. We split up. Jonah went to check the east wing, Dr. Lee retreated toward the supply room, and I made my way through corridor after corridor that now felt impossibly long. The snow outside had risen high enough to press against the windows. The glass moaned with every gust. When I reached pediatrics, the small night lights still glowed faintly. 2 children were sleeping, brother and sister, barely old enough to spell their names. Their mother, Mai, dozed in the chair beside them, head tilted against the wall. I pulled her blanket up gently. She stirred, but didn't wake. Just 10 more minutes, she murmured in Mandarin. Her voice made me ache with nostalgia. My own mother used to whisper those same words on winter mornings when I refused to get up for school. For a fraction of a second, I could almost smell home. Warm rice, rain-soaked shoes drying by the heater. Then the moment was gone, dragged under by another sound. A faint clang from somewhere below. It wasn't thunder. It was metal. Deliberate. I grabbed my flashlight again and moved toward the stairwell. The sound came once more, closer now, not from the basement, but from the service elevator. When I reached it, the indicator light blinked red. The doors stood slightly ajar, frozen midway. A trickle of melted snow ran down the crack. Someone had forced it open from below. "Jonah?" I called softly. No answer. Slowly, I pried the doors apart and looked down. The shaft was dark, the weak daylight from the upper floors dissolving into black halfway. But at the bottom, faint movement shimmered, like someone searching through debris. I leaned forward slightly. "Hey! Who's down there?" The movement stopped. Then, in the darkness, a voice, hoarse, trembling, whispered, "Help." My heart lurched. "Hold on, I'll get a rope."
But when I turned to grab one from the nearby supply closet, the elevator groaned. The cable strained. A sudden blast of static crackled through the walkie clipped to my waist. "Minji, where are you?" Jonah's voice, sharp, clipped. "Service elevator! There's someone down here!" His reply came back distorted. "Don't go there!" The line died. I turned back to the shaft. Silence. When I aimed the flashlight again, the bottom was empty, only a trail of wet footprints leading away into a maintenance tunnel I didn't even know existed. A hiss of air escaped the vent above me. The generator lights blinked off, one after another, until only my flashlight beam remained. That's when something cold brushed against my neck. I spun, nearly dropping the light. Nothing there. Just the corridor stretching back into shadow. My own pulse hammered so loud I could hear it. Then, faintly, words whispered through the static on my walkie again. Not Jonah's voice. This time, deeper, slower. "Leave the lights on." The flashlight flickered. I ran.
When I burst into the main hall, Dr. Lee jumped, nearly dropping a tray of supplies. "What happened?" "There's someone down in the tunnels," I panted. "They knew about the lights." He grabbed the walkie from my hand, listening to the static. "Nothing but interference." It wasn't interference. His jaw tightened. "All right, show me." We descended together, flashlights sweeping across the damp cement walls. The lower floors of the building were older, remnants of the original hospital that hadn't been renovated after the floods. Rusted pipes, cracked tiles, flickering bulbs that hummed weakly like dying fireflies. "Why haven't you told anyone about this section?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. "Because it wasn't supposed to exist anymore. The government condemned it after the foundation shift 2 winters ago. We were never authorized to use it." "Then why is it still powered?" That stopped him. We reached the tunnel where I'd seen the footprints. They trailed off into a deeper hallway lit only by the glow of a single emergency bulb. On the far wall, words had been scratched into the paint with something sharp. "They always come back for what's missing." I stepped closer. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, but familiar. Dr. Lee noticed before I could hide it. "You've seen this before?" I swallowed hard. "It's the same note the missing patient left." He glanced down the corridor, mind working fast. If he wrote both, maybe he never left the building. Before I could process the implication, a distant scream cut through the halls. Jonah's voice. We ran. By the time we reached the ICU wing, the sound had faded, replaced by the steady drip of water from a burst ceiling pipe. Jonah was slumped against the doorframe, a smear of blood on his cheek. "What happened?" I knelt beside him. "Something," he gasped. "Someone hit me from behind," took the radio, ran toward pediatrics. Dr. Lee cursed under his breath and sprinted for the hall. I followed despite the tremor in my knees. When we reached pediatrics, the room looked exactly as I'd left it. The children still slept, their mother still dozing. But near the window, the curtain flapped slightly, as if someone had just slipped past it. I hurried closer. The cold from the outside seeped through a cracked pane. Beneath it, wet footprints again. Bare feet, no shoes. May stirred. "Is something wrong?" "I'm just checking the window seal," I said quickly. She nodded groggily, settling back. Her breath fogged faintly in the air. The temperature was dropping fast. Dr. Lee whispered, "They're moving through the walls. Whoever's still here, they know the old maintenance shafts." How many could be left? Enough to finish what they started, if that message was about more than fear. It struck me then that everything had unraveled far beyond medical chaos. Something was lurking between disaster and obsession. Around dawn, we managed to stabilize the remaining patients, though most were unconscious. Jonah rested in the storage room, the cut on his temple stitched clumsily by Dr. Lee. When he finally slept, I sat beside the heater, staring at the frost crawling over the windows like veins. Dr. Lee joined me, setting down 2 paper cups of instant coffee. "Still tastes like cardboard," he said quietly. "At least it's warm." We drank in silence. The steam coiled between us like fragile peace. Then he spoke again, voice low. "Do you know why I became a doctor?" I looked at him. "Prestige? Family expectations?" He shook his head. "I killed my brother." The cup froze halfway to my lips. "It was an accident. We were children. He fell through the ice outside our house. I was supposed to be watching him. I pulled him out, but he didn't wake up. My parents never forgave me. So I thought, if I saved enough people, maybe eventually one of them would count as him." The confession hit with such rawness I didn't know what to say. The man who'd once seemed invincible was unraveling in front of me, piece by piece. "You don't have to keep punishing yourself," I said softly. He gave a faint laugh. "Don't I? Every patient I lose just proves I haven't done enough." I wanted to argue, but footsteps interrupted us. Jonas stood in the doorway, expression unreadable. "There's something you both need to see," he said. We followed him back to the burns unit, where the missing patient had vanished. The room was empty again, except for the bed sheets still crumpled on the floor. Jonah pointed to the wall above them. Something had been carved overnight, the letters jagged, uneven, but legible. I was never alone. For a long moment, no one spoke. The generator hummed faintly, struggling to keep the light steady. Dr. Lee's face turned pale. "This building? It used to be connected to the old psychiatric ward," he said slowly, "before the flood cut it off. So there's another way in?" He nodded grimly. "Through those tunnels, the ones you saw." Outside, wind howled again, rattling every window. A child cried softly in the next room. Somewhere below, a metallic echo pulsed like breathing. Jonah whispered, "What if whoever's still here isn't trying to get out, but to finish something that started long before tonight?" I shivered. The snow outside looked endless, blindingly white against the blood that had dried near the service bay door. Dr. Lee grabbed a flashlight. "We're ending this, now." I followed him to the stairwell before Jonah could protest. The tunnels waited below, silent, dark, almost expectant. As we crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped sharply, breath rising in misty clouds. Something hummed behind the walls, faint but rhythmic, like machinery struggling to restart. We turned a corner and froze. There, in the narrow corridor, stood a figure in a tattered medical gown, head tilted, eyes reflecting the flashlight beam. Not a ghost. A man. Barefoot. Alive. Dr. Lee stepped forward cautiously. "Sir, you need medical assistance. We can help you." The man blinked slowly, his lips trembling. "Help?" he rasped. "You closed the doors. You left us here." "I don't understand," I whispered. The man took another halting step closer. His skin was pale, almost bluish. "They said the flood was over. They never came back for us." Dr. Lee went rigid. "That's impossible. That section was cleared years ago." The man's gaze lifted to his face, something like recognition flashing there. "You promised." Before either of us could react, the light flickered. The man lunged forward. But not to attack. He collapsed against Dr. Lee, knees buckling, body trembling violently. His lips moved, forming words I couldn't quite hear. Dr. Lee caught him, steadying his weight with surprising gentleness. "Easy," Lee whispered. "We've got you." I rushed forward, flashlight beam sweeping over the man's face. Up close, I could see the damage. Frostbite on his fingertips, bruises mottling his arms, eyes sunk deep into hollow sockets. He wasn't violent. He was dying. "How long have you been down here?" I asked softly.
His breath came in shallow gasps. Since the flood, they said evacuate, but the doors locked behind us. My stomach twisted. Us? He nodded weakly. Eyes drifted toward the darkness behind him. 17 of us. Patients, orderlies, stuck in the old ward. No one came back. Dr. Lee's face went ashen. That's impossible. The evacuation was complete. I signed off on the final clearance myself. The man's gaze lifted slowly, recognition flickering again. You were the one who left. The words hit like a blade. Dr. Lee's hands trembled as he lowered the man gently to the ground. I thought everyone was out. The records showed. The records were wrong. We waited. Days. Then weeks. The water kept rising. We thought someone would remember us. I knelt beside him, heart hammering. Are the others still alive? He closed his eyes. Some, maybe. I don't know anymore. Jonah's voice crackled through the walkie. Minji, where are you? The generator's failing again. We're in the tunnels. We found someone. There might be more. Static swallowed his reply. The lights above us flickered, then died completely, leaving only our flashlights cutting through the dark. Dr. Lee stood abruptly, jaw set. We're going deeper. Are you insane? I hissed. We don't know what's down there. I have to know, he said, voice raw. If I left people behind, His words choked off. For the first time, I saw him not as arrogant or cold, but as a man drowning in guilt so profound it had erased everything else. He didn't just want to save lives. He needed to rewrite the one unforgivable failure. I took a breath. Then we go together. We helped the man to his feet, supporting his weight between us. He directed us through the maze of corridors, each one narrower and damper than the last. Water dripped from cracked pipes overhead, pooling in dark puddles that reflected our movements like ghosts. Finally, we reached a heavy door, rusted shut. The man pointed weakly. Through there. Dr. Lee and I pushed against it, metal groaning in protest. It gave way suddenly, swinging inward with a shriek that echoed through the tunnels. Cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of mildew and something else, something human. Inside, the room stretched wider than I expected. Emergency lights still glowed faintly along the ceiling, casting everything in a sickly yellow. And there, scattered across makeshift beds and chairs, were people. Some unconscious, others staring blankly at the walls. Their clothes were torn, faces gaunt, skin pale as wax. Oh my God, I breathed. Jonah appeared behind us, panting. He must have followed the sound. His eyes went wide. How is this possible? Dr. Lee moved forward slowly, as if stepping into a nightmare he couldn't wake from. I don't know. One of the figures stirred, a woman, maybe in her 50s, with silver hair matted against her forehead. She looked up at us with hollow eyes. You came back. Yes, I said, kneeling beside her. We're here now. Tears streaked down her cheeks. We thought you forgot us. Never, I whispered, though the word felt like a lie. Someone had forgotten them. Someone had closed the door and walked away. Dr. Lee stood frozen in the center of the room, staring at the faces around him. His hands shook. I signed the clearance. I checked every floor. How did I miss this? The man we'd found earlier coughed weakly. The records. Someone changed them. After the flood, someone wanted this place erased. Who? Jonah demanded. The man's gaze drifted to Dr. Lee. The board, the investors. They wanted the old ward shut down, too expensive to repair, so they made sure it stayed closed. Dr. Lee's face went white. They falsified the evacuation records. And You signed them, the man finished quietly. The silence that followed was suffocating. Dr. Lee's entire body seemed to collapse inward, shoulders slumping, head bowing. He'd spent years punishing himself for his brother's death, trying to atone through perfection. But this was worse. He hadn't just failed, he'd been complicit. I didn't know, he whispered. But you should have, the woman said, not cruelly, but with the weight of someone who'd lived through abandonment. You were supposed to check. For a moment, I thought he might break completely, but then slowly he lifted his head. His eyes, no longer cold, no longer arrogant, burned with something else. Determination. Then I'll fix it, he said quietly. Starting now. We worked through the night, moving the survivors one by one through the tunnels and to the main hospital. It was slow, exhausting work. Some were too weak to walk. Others couldn't remember their own names. But we carried them, dragged them, whispered promises we weren't sure we could keep. Jonah rigged the generator to hold for a few more hours. I rationed what little medicine remained, stretching supplies impossibly thin. Dr. Lee moved like a man possessed, stitching wounds, setting broken bones, murmuring apologies to people who could barely hear him. By the time dawn broke fully, the main hall was crowded again, not with avalanche victims, but with ghosts brought back to life. The storm had finally passed, leaving the city buried in pristine white. Church bells rang again, clearer this time, echoing across the silence. May, the mother from pediatrics, found me near the window. You saved them, she said softly. We all did, I replied. She smiled, then pressed something into my hand, a small paper crane, folded carefully from a scrap of medical chart paper. For luck and gratitude. I held it gently, throat tight. Around us, people were waking up, not just physically, but spiritually. The air felt different now, lighter, despite the exhaustion hanging over everyone. Dr. Lee approached, face drawn but steady. The roads are clearing. Emergency services are en route. Good, I said quietly. He hesitated, then spoke. I owe you an apology for everything. You owe them the apology, I said, nodding towards the survivors. I know. He paused. But you stayed when I told you to leave. You fought when I gave up. That matters. I looked at him, seeing not the arrogant surgeon who'd dismissed everyone, but a broken man trying to rebuild himself one choice at a time. It only matters if you keep going. He nodded slowly. I will.
By afternoon, ambulances and rescue teams filled the parking lot. News crews followed, cameras sweeping over the building, capturing the impossible story of a hospital that refused to die. They called it a Christmas miracle. The receptionist who stayed, the doctor who returned, the forgotten souls saved from the snow. But standing there, watching medics load survivors into warm vehicles, I knew the truth. It wasn't a miracle. It was a choice. 17 people made in the span of one night. To stay, to fight, to remember the people everyone else forgot. Jonah found me later, leaning against the wall near the break room. The Christmas lights still blinked weakly above the door. He handed me a cup of terrible coffee. We did it, he said, grinning through exhaustion. Yeah, I replied, we did. He glanced toward Dr. Lee, who was speaking with a reporter outside. Think he'll actually change? I watched as Lee knelt beside one of the children being loaded into an ambulance, his hand resting gently on the boy's shoulder. The arrogance was gone. What remained was fragile, uncertain, but real. I think he's trying. That's enough for now. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the snow in shades of gold and rose, the hospital finally fell quiet. Most of the patients had been transferred. The staff would arrive tomorrow to begin cleanup. But tonight, the building belonged to those of us who'd stayed. I walked through the empty halls one last time, footsteps echoing softly. The walls still smelled like antiseptic and survival. In pediatrics, I found the paper crane May had given me and placed it carefully on the windowsill, where it caught the last light of day. Dr. Lee appeared in the doorway. Ready to go? Almost. He stepped inside, glancing around the room. I'm shutting down my private practice, going to reopen this place properly. Full funding, no board interference. I turned to him surprised. That's a big decision. It's the right one. He paused, then added, I'd like you to stay as more than a receptionist, maybe as a partner. The offer hung in the air, unexpected and genuine. For years, I'd been invisible. Just the girl at the front desk, answering phones, filing charts. But tonight had changed something fundamental. I wasn't invisible anymore. I'll think about it, I said. He smiled faintly. That's more than I deserve. We walked out together into the frozen night. The city glowed softly under fresh snow, every rooftop and streetlight wrapped in white. Above us, stars blinked through the clearing clouds. Somewhere in the distance, carolers sang, off-key but hopeful. Jonah locked the doors behind us, then turned. So what do we do now? I looked at both of them, this strange, exhausted, imperfect team that had somehow held the world together for one impossible night. Now, I said, we go home, rest, and tomorrow we start again. Because that's what hope was, not a miracle dropped from the sky, but a choice made every single morning to stay, to fight, to remember the people everyone else forgot. The snow crunched beneath our feet as we walked toward the parking lot. Behind us, the hospital stood silent but alive, windows glowing faintly like embers. The night had tested us, broken us, and somehow built us back stronger. Dr. Lee paused near his car, glancing back. Do you think they'll remember us? I followed his gaze. I think we'll remember them. And that's what matters. He nodded slowly, then climbed into his car. Jonah waved goodbye, heading toward the bus stop. I stood alone for a moment longer, watching the building one last time. A figure moved past one of the upper windows, just a shadow, fleeting and soft. For a second, I thought it was one of the survivors. But the floor was empty. We'd checked twice. A chill ran down my spine. Then I saw it. On the glass, barely visible in the frost, words traced by an invisible hand. Thank you. I smiled, breath fogging in the cold. You're welcome. When I turned to leave, the city felt different, not quieter, but kinder, the kind of kindness that only comes after surviving something impossible together. As I walked toward my car, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. The board knows what you found. Be careful. My heart skipped. I glanced back at the hospital, suddenly aware of how exposed it was, how vulnerable. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. But tonight, under the stars and snow, with the memory of 17 saved lives warming my chest, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not fear, not doubt. Just the quiet, unshakable certainty that some battles are worth fighting, even when the whole world tells you to walk away. I started the engine, snow melting on the windshield. In the rearview mirror, the hospital lights blinked once, then steadied. Somewhere inside, life flickered on. And so did I.